So yeah, again, Solution Stack, it's a local servicing company that offers dedicated services to the oil and gas industry. Where at the moment we are majoring in a portfolio of 5 services, from well services, oil data management, HSE, asset integrity management, and also we conduct training. Yeah, again, so with regard to the HSE, with me it's Engineer Judith Macho, who was previously said hello to the team. So she's serving as the HSE Solutions Coordinator, serving the portfolio and managing the department in terms of all the operations. And with us, she will be leading the discussion of today regarding this webinar. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Judith Marchett to at least provide a brief description of the webinar today and take us through the presentation. Madam Engineer Judith, welcome.
Thank you, Wilson. I'm going to share my window. Right. Right. So my name is Judith, as Wilson introduced me. HSE Solution Coordinator from Solution Tag. And today we're going to have a little bit of understanding, of course, a little bit of discussion on fire risk assessment, most especially on what you need to know to protect your business, what you need to know to protect your asset, your operations, your employees. So this is basically what we are going to discuss today, and we are going to dive into understanding the operations, the importance or objectives of this fire risk assessment. Then you will go to see the key requirements for a suitable fire risk assessment. We'll see the methodologies, we'll see how to make decisions, we'll see the number of common scenarios, common hazard, common pitfalls that usually are being found during risk assessment, or that usually happen during the fire risk assessment process. And then we'll see some of the responsibility of key parties during fire risk assessment. Yep. So Wilson introduced me to discuss on fire risk assessment. As we continue now, let's hit the ground running to go deep on this point. So starting with the introduction, I know as business owners, as business leaders, yes, safety should be our top priority in anything that we do. And as we know, fire can cause any devastating damage to whether to your properties or to your employees, to the equipment that you have. And just from one of the NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, this was just one of the information in 2019. There are over 100,000 non-residential fires in 2019 alone. So with this one, you can see it's very crucial to conduct a fire risk assessment in your business. With this number of incidents happening, then it's very important for us to conduct a fire risk assessment to ensure we minimize whatever kind of risk, especially of fires that can be happening at our environment or at our workplace. So as a business owners, yes, we understand our primary objectives include delivering the quality product and service. Yes, we know that it's a primary. We usually look forward to generate a lot of profits, to see our customer base growing. Yes, these are our primary goals in any business. But while these are the primary goals, we will understand that for these goals to be met, then there are some factors for success. And one of the crucial aspect for the success of these goals, our primary goals in any business, then most of times we usually overlook the fire safety. But trust me, this is one among the very crucial aspects that we need to focus on in any business to ensure that we meet those primary goals of generating the profit, growing the customer base for our business or for our operation, and all that we have from our business. So fire risk assessment basically it's a process to look at what can lead to fire at your environment. So basically you go down to analyze all the processes to characterize the risk that can be associated with a certain process or certain operation, and then you see the number of fire scenarios that can be involved into that process, and then you go down to see how likely that process or how likely is that risk can be happening, or the probability of occurrence of that risk, and then you go down to look if it's happened, then what the consequences it can have, whether to my operation, to my work, to my business. So speaking of that, that is basically when you are speaking of fire risk assessment, you are basically speaking of that. Just in few words, you can say it's just an organized look at your premises, be it a premises or a workplace, to see in that what can actually lead to fire, can lead to harm due to fire in that kind of the environment. So you can understand that with this one, then a responsible person. Speaking of the responsible person, we are speaking of the employer, if it's a workplace. We are speaking of the business owner. We are speaking of the owner of the business. We are speaking of anyone who has a control of the, whether it's a business or it's a premises or it's a operation. So anyone who has control of that. Let's say, for example, you are in the industry, you are the safety manager in there, then you are in control of safety of that area, then you are the responsible person we are talking about right now. So this responsible person has to make sure that they produce a suitable and a sufficient assessment of the risk with relevant to the persons exposed. Now we are talking of these persons, can be the employers, the employees, can be the visitors, can be some guests, can be some contractors or consultants that are working in that area. So you have to make sure you produce a sufficient assessment of the risk which is relevant to those people, and you do this with the one purpose to make sure you identify whatever fire precaution that need to be taken in that area, whether it's a regulatory requirement. Speaking in Tanzania, we have our fire and rescue regulations, number of them that we need to adhere to. So you are trying to see whatever and to identify whatever precaution that you are supposed to do in that, and whatever requirement that you are supposed to comply under whatever regulations that you speak of, and not only that, whatever you can do to make sure you ensure the safety of that environment, of that people, of those equipment and those operations. So this is basically a risk assessment. And one of the tricks with risk assessment is that, of course, it's a complex. It's a very complex operation. Why do I say it's a complex? Because an assessor has a number of things that has to look on. You have to start with the compartmentation of that area of the premises, going down to the occupant characteristic, going down to the detection system, the escape route, the materials of construction of the things. So it's a complex, it's a very complex operation that one has to do, and it's very tricky because there are a number of stakeholders involved in this one, and everyone has their own interest in this fire risk assessment. As you can see in this diagram, starting from the owner to the assessors. So the owner may want to see they reduce the risk to their premises or to their business to as low as possible to maintain their reputation. While going down, he cannot do only that alone. There are designers in place who can make sure that they incorporate whatever safety measure that is required from the designing phase. But we also have the builders that need to look on the construction method that they need to do to construct the premises, to ensure that they take into account whatever safety measure is required. But you have the occupiers that need to be safe in that area. You have the building managers. Of course, you find the building manager need to understand what is required. They need to look at it for the maintenance, in maintenance perspective, or to make sure they maintain the structures, to make sure they maintain the equipment. You have the human resource that need to make sure they protect their people. But again, there is assessor who need to satisfy all of them and to look at each and every aspect of it. So it's not an easy process that you can do. Of course, it's a complex in nature. So that means if you are to deal with this, then you have to be a little bit thorough. You need to be thorough to analyze each and everything in details, and you need to make sure you don't miss any information on the way, so that you can produce a suitable risk assessment report. So as we proceed, we will see some of the objectives of fire risk assessment, of course, which can be also the importance of this fire risk assessment. Of course, you need to protect the lives of the employees. Yes, you need to make sure they are safe. The way they came to work, they have to go back safe without any kind of incident. Especially, we are speaking of the fire incident, so they need to go back safe without any effect of whether fire itself or the product of fire. We are speaking of smokes, speaking of fumes. So you need to make sure you maintain their lives. This can be employees, can be the customers. Probably you are into the area where you are dealing with customers each now and then. Can be the visitors to your areas. Sometimes you can have contractors, consultants to your area. You need to protect their life. And the other thing, you need to comply with regulations. Here I'm speaking, for example, in Tanzania, I'm speaking of our fire and rescue regulations that we are having. Then you need to comply with it to make sure you safeguard your business, of course, whatever, against any kind of legal action that can be taken to your business. But again, you need to have a comprehensive fire safety plan. You need to have a plan that can protect your assets. You need to have a plan that can protect your equipment. Then this fire risk assessment can be one of the tools that can give you that plan, which can ensure that your business assets are protected or your people are protected, and then you comply to whatever regulations. So that means you are sure that you can be termed as a responsible and reputable business, because you have the number of this fire risk assessment you have conducted, and not only the report, you have taken all the measures that are recommended from that assessment. Yeah, that's a little bit of course, of the introduction. I hope up to now we are all into one line. We all understand where we are going. A bit sure that we understand what we are talking about as we keep diving into the topics. I'm so sure that this introduction can serve as a base, a foundation to our discussion today. Yep. Yeah. So this is just a culture. So conducting a fire risk assessment is a wise investment that it's not only ensure the safety of your business, but of course it enhances a reputation as a responsible and reliable business, whether it's a business, whether it's an organization, or it's a company. So this is the wise investment that you can make to your business to make sure you maintain your brand, but again, you maintain the safety of your business. Now let's see the key requirements. There are some requirements that is required to produce sufficient and a suitable fire risk assessment. Of course, I mentioned a few of them, and since I know all of us here, we have some things to add. Probably we'll be adding from our understanding, from our experience. Yes. the number of scenarios that you have met, but these are just a few of them. So when someone is conducting a fire risk assessment, there is a need to have the good relationship. Of course, a client and the assessor understanding. They need to share some of the information. They need to communicate. They need to keep things clear. The assessor need to have an access to whatever information that can be of importance to his assessment, and the client, since he is the owner of the premises or he is the owner of the operation, and of course he might have some deep understanding of his own operation, then he has to be there to make sure he provides whatever necessary details that an assessor may need to make sure that they come out with the suitable and there's sufficient report of this assessment. But again, there's a need for understanding, the deep understanding of the operations, starting from one unit operation to the other unit operation, of the equipment, how are they working, what the nature of them, what are their properties. So there's a need to understand each equipment one after another, each operation one after another, and then analyzing the protection equipment available at that area. And then when you are analyzing this protection equipment, that means you need to analyze one after another. While you are doing this, you have to remember, what are you trying to achieve? So if you remember that your primary objective is that you are trying to stop a fire, and then if you are trying to stop a fire, you need to mitigate the risk in that area, then you have to think of, so if there is a fire in this area, can we get out? How do we get out? Is there any means of escape that we can get out? Is that means of escape clear that my people can access it? Is that means of escape available? Does it have an end? Is it protected? How can they move out? How about the distance, the traveling distance? Can people maintain to get out of this building safe? Yes. If you think of this kind of question, yes, you may say, okay, we can get out. We can get out safe. We have the escape route that is protected, that is visible, that is clear and unobstructed. Yes. And then again, you can try to ask yourself, if there is a fire, will we know? And how do we know it? Do we have the detection system in place to notify us? Is it available that you can get information at whatever corner of this premises or this facility, that you can understand what is going on? Yes, probably we might have the detection and the detection system. Do we have the alarming system? Is it audible enough for people to hear it and respond? How will we know about it? Yes, probably the detection might be there. Then the alarming system, where the sounders, the sirens might be there. Are they working? That we can use them at the time we need them. Are they working? Do we conduct a regular service and maintenance of them? Do we test them to make sure that they can work? How sure are we? How many percent that we can say we are sure that we'll be notified of any fire outbreak that can be happening at any corner of our premises? And do people know how to respond on it? Are they aware of what are they supposed to do in case they hear maybe this kind of alarm? How are they supposed to react? Where are they supposed to go? Yes. So we can even go down to think, so if there's a fire, what about the fire service? Can we suppress fire at the moment? Do we have enough protection system? Do we have enough suppression system? Yes. If we need the assistance of the external party, probably the fire is out of our control. We need assistance from fire. Can they manage to reach here? What can they use? Can they use our system to protect the area? Can they use our system to suppress the fire? Yes, they can use our system. Now, how will they use it? Do we have the point of connection that they can come and connect and of course use our system? Do we have an access to them? Do people know if that kind of information, then they can reach out to them? How do they know? So you find there are a number of things that you can go down. You have to be thorough. You have to remember what you are trying to achieve. So if you take a look at them, if you take you go deep analyzing one after another, and if you try to answer these questions from one point to another, from one stage going down till you find the root, the cause of each and everything, and how you can mitigate each and everything, then you will find that you can produce a suitable fire risk assessment, because you'll be trying to achieve, or you'll be trying to touch each and every point, of course, probably all the points that you need to discuss into that assessment. Yeah. In whatever circumstance, in whatever that you are trying to discuss, you have to remember, you have to be inquisitive. Yes, be inquisitive. You are eager to know more. You have the question for each and everything. Let's say, for example, there are a number of systems that work independent. Probably you say that if you're asking yourself, how will we know if there is a fire somewhere? Then you say there's a detection system. Yes, there's a detection system that people can be notified of any system. But yes, after they be notified, can they get out without an escape route? Then you realize that you need to have the escape route, that people after being notified, they need to get out. Yes, probably we have that escape route, but if that escape route maintained, how about the material of construction of that escape route? Probably the escape route itself is constructed with material which is it's a fuel itself. It can catch fire, then it cannot be used. Then you understand, if that escape route has emergency lighting, can people see it? Yes. Okay, you understand. Okay, if it's a fire that you can fight with, do we have the suppression system? The suppression system maintained. Then you go down to see, how about the smoke? Do we have the enough ventilation? How about the strategy itself to evacuate the premises? How about the height of that area? How about the management controls? How about the characteristic of the occupant itself? Are they aware of that? What are they supposed to do? Are they aware of the risk of the hazard presenting in that area? How about the layout itself? How about the compartmentation? So you understand, you need to be thorough in each and everything that you're analyzing, because these things, they are interlinked from one point to another. So you have to understand, it's not only analyzing one point, but you have to analyze how does that one point link to another, and how does that one point affect the other point, and then that's where you can come out with the conclusion that can be of sound, can be suitable, can be working to minimize the risk into that area. So if you find yourself you are analyzing only one component, then you are not yet there. You need to see each and every component. As you can see in this diagram, you can see you have compartmentation, but it's linked to a number of issues that you need to see. So you can not just say this is right until you check all the other components, and then after checking all the other components and how they are connected and how they might affect each and every one of them, then you can come up to the solution of what is supposed to be done in that area. Yeah. So this is a little of what we're supposed to do. It's very important to be thorough. It's very, very important to be thorough. And this can be just one of the examples. Maybe you are trying to check on the sprinkler system. So you are trying to check the sprinkler system, and you are an assessor. Then you start with maybe you are checking the testing of the sprinkler system, starting with the testing that have been done with on society, whether it's engineers or responsible for the sprinkler system. Then you check what are the weekly testing reports, what are the weekly inspection reports, and then you go to see what are the monthly reports. What do they say? What were they checking? Are they sufficient? Then you go down to see, okay, There are some of the reports produced on site, others are routine, but there are some others that have been done by the specialists. Then you go down to see those routine services that a specialist or a contractor has to do to that sprinkler system. Then you go down to see what are the quarterly testing reports, what do they check. Then you go, what are the semi-annual reports? Because the things that you check in the quarterly report and the semi-annual report are different things. Then you see what are the semi-annual report on this sprinkler system. What do they say? Then you go down to see what are the yearly reports, what are the yearly testing, how do they conduct it, what were the findings, what about the 2 years testing report, where are the findings? Then you go down to see for the 3 years, how about the 10 years, how about the 25 years testing, what did they see, what did they find? Is there something that they whether overlooked it, they didn't check? Their point that need to be rectified to make sure that sprinkler system work. So you need to be thorough. You need to check each and everything. As an assessor, you have to make sure you have access to every information, every detailed information of the system that you are assessing at the moment. That's very important for whether it's an assessor or whether you are doing that assessment for yourself. Then you have to be thorough, you have to be inquisitive. You need to ask yourself a question. Probably we say we are doing a gauge testing on a sprinkler system. Then you need to have a number of questions to ask yourself. What can go wrong? What if the gauge is not rare? What if the gauge is not reading? What can happen? So you have the number of scenarios, you have the number of questions that you need to ask yourself to come out with the reports. And this is just a methodology. So you start to identify the fire hazard at the area. Then after analyzing the hazard, then you identify the people at risk. And at this area, at this point of identify the people, you have to consider those people who can be working alone in some areas. You have to make sure you understand whoever can be working alone and take consideration of them. After that, you have to evaluate the risk. And this evaluating the risk, you need to see the probability, the likelihood, the consequence it can be happening, and the risk level. And then you have to implement the measures to make sure you reduce those risks to as low as reasonable possible. And then you have to make sure you document, you have the reports, and that reports need to be reviewed, they need to be adapted, need to be shared for improvement at your area. So this is an example of evaluating the risk. Probably we have the smoke movement inside the building. Now, as we all see, we know, as we see in this picture, when the fire starts, the characteristics of the smoke usually goes up. Now, you find you need to get out of this building. How can you move from this area, maybe going to the emergency door? How can you move? Will you just stand working? Well, you know, on the upside there'll be smoke, and if you inhale the smoke, then you might faint, and then you faint, you might die in there. And these are the most scenario that usually happen. People usually die from smoke itself. It's not even fire. Fire it's always the last point, yeah? But most of them usually die from smoke. So you see, do they know how to move? Yeah, do they know what to do in case of fire? And where the emergency door, can they access it at the point that they need? Where does it open? Is it opening inward or outward? You need to understand. So if there's a smoke and someone can faint due to smoke, and then the door is opening inside, you find somebody can fail to get out. But if the door is opening outward, then somebody can try to crawl and they push the door, and then they can go out, where we'll reduce the risk at that area. And these are the common usual found, and so from many into many workplace, you find some of the scenario that's the line of sight was missing. probably there was a fire somewhere, and then due to obstruction, people could not manage to see if there is a fire somewhere, and then at the end they found themselves they are captured in a building where there is a fire product or the fire itself, and then they cannot get out. But what was the main cause? The line of sight was missing from that area or from that angle that we are standing. But again, there's this the problem that you find yourself, you fail to identify all the hazard. And this, of course, can lead to inadequate risk perception. Whether you might find there's a common hazard to that area, but you overlooked it. And if you overlooked it, you find you have the deficit in risk control in that things. And when the emergence happen or when the fire starts, then you find you into the position that you cannot guarantee the safety of your people, of yourself. But at some point you find the hierarchy of controls is not followed. As we know, there's a hierarchy of controls, from minimizing, whether to eliminate it, whether to reduce the exposure to those hazards. Of course, starting from elimination itself, if you fail to eliminate, then you go to substitute. If you fail to substitute, then there's the engineering controls. You find there administrative controls and PPEs. But to some most scenarios, you find people negligent this hierarchy of controls. They just go direct to PPE. Yes, you have PPEs. Yes, this is it's a last control that you can have. But if you fail to maintain the engineering control, you find there are still some controls that you can do, but you just ignore them, and this of course increase the risk to that area. But you find some areas where the risk level is not brought down to as low as reasonable practical. That means that whether you are trying to reduce the risk, but there's still some other measures that are very important that you could use to reduce that risk. And some point you find, maybe let's take this simple scenario. You are into the oil and gas operation. You are working with oil, right? And then you are putting water as a fat control into that area. When we deep down, we understand that if there's a fire and there's oil spillage, or you have whether it's a tank, and then that's when you use water is much more denser than oil. That means it will go down and then oil will go up, and the fire will still continue. So yes, you use their means of control, but it cannot reduce that risk. But probably if we could use foam, it could mask the oil, and then you could reduce the risk to some point at that scenario. And to some point, you find that the health and well-being of the people is being overlooked in whatever the risk assessment that has been done, or whatever the place that has been done. So you find that there's some scenario you find people are not aware of hazard that can be happening, are not aware of the fire products and how they can affect their health. You find, yes, you have the escape route, you have the escape route, but that escape route cannot guarantee the health of the people. They can get out, but they cannot be safe in that area. You have the flammable dust that can affect their health. So you need to check on all of them when you need to produce a risk assessment, when you need to make sure your area is safe. Then you have to see on all of them, and these are just some of them, but these are the most common into many scenarios. And as you can see, the common hazard probably that we usually find out, you find there's some overloaded circuit, as you can see in this diagram. So each circuit it has the maximum capacity it can handle. So if you overload it to some point, you can lead to shock, electric shock, and at the end you find you have the electrical fire, and this has been contributing to the most electrical fires that are happening from homes to workplaces. This is something that we need to avoid. We should not take it as just a simple scenario. Here I'm speaking to the engineers. We usually find a way to make sure we have our connection. Yes, we can find a way, but we should not overlook safety. Just look for the maximum capacity of that socket. Then don't overweigh it, don't overload it. Some scenarios you find there is a blocked escape route. Yes, as you can see in these pictures, these doors are the escape route. But again, if we need to use them, the doors is blocked. There are things, there are luggages, there are boxes, papers. There are a lot of things in front of that door. Can we really access them at the time of the emergency? No, we cannot access them. In time of the emergency, that means people may fail to get out. If they fail to get out in one way or another, they'll be affected. And if they can be affected, that means the risk level to that area is increased. Yes, to some point, you find there are some fault wiring, and this has been found, I think it's so many areas. If you really take a look to analyze the wiring that you have, you find to some point you have the loose cables. As you can see in these right pictures, we have the loose cables and we have the furnitures, yeah, that are combustible material nearby it. So if there's just an electrical shock, these materials can burn. Of course, there can be a fire in that area. But look at this other scenario. You have the loose cables, you have the loose connection in here, and then you have the metals which are electrical conductors. But again, beside it, you have the combustible materials. So this is very dangerous. You need to analyze each and every scenario that you are dealing with into your area. But again, look at this scenario. This is an office, but look at how papers are being positioned in this office. Just to try to imagine, you are sitting into this office with this kind of housekeeping, with this kind of papers, and then think of if a fire starts. All of these are combustible material. All of this, they can catch fire, and they can, the bad thing of these loose papers, they can catch fire very easily. So you find this area is a very risk area that you need to look at. If you are working to the office, make sure that you maintain a proper housekeeping. Whatever paper that you are producing, make sure you maintain them properly, how you organize them, how you keep them. If it is not necessary, don't keep a lot of paper into the office where people are working with. If it is not necessary, and if it is not necessary, don't use papers. If you can use electronics method, if you can store your files online, that will be very important to make sure you maintain or you reduce the risk to your area. Now, let's say at this scenario, it's a flammable material. Now, this one, we have this oil tanker that we need. You find that this area, someone need to fill the oil that's their forklift, and then if they need to fill their forklift, maybe they might be needing a larger supply of whether it's a diesel or petrol. So this is the oil tanker that is filling the oil, speaking of the flammable fuel, into these barricades located in here. But again, just beside the barricades, they are flammable and combustible material. And then you can see in this area, the area itself is not protected, it's not secured. Someone can pass in here with a cigarette. They can be smoking cigarette. If they just throw out the cigarette in here, then the fire can start, because there is oil, then the flammable oil, the flammable fuel, and then you have beside it, you have the combustible material. The area itself is not maintained. You have the number of the oil spills in here. But again, if you look up into this, you find there are some electrical connection, and to some points there are loose connections, which of course they can lead to shock, they can cause electrical fire, but that electrical fire can be propagated to flammable fuel, can be propagated to combustible fuel, and then whatever output of fire in this area, of course, it can be very horrible. So you need to analyze all of them. If you are working into these areas, into this kind of areas, or if you are working into your office, then you have to make sure you analyze whatever which can be a source of ignition, which can be a source of fuel, which can be a source of oxygen, and make sure that they don't meet. Make sure that you maintain them that into the position that they cannot be exposed to cause fire into our areas. So after evaluating those hazards, after evaluating those scenarios, then you need to calm down to make decision. So you find into making decision, you have the two sides that can help you to make decision. First, you have the likelihood of occurrence, how likely that scenario, how likely that hazard, how likely that situation can be happening, and if it happened, what can be the consequence. So you find probably here we have the 3x4 matrix, where so if you say it's unlikely to occur, that means it's very negligible, it's very unlikely for that scenario or for that potential source of ignition to happen into your area. But if we say it's possible, that means that is a normal fire hazard. It can be happening there at any time. And if you say it's likely to occur, that means it's probable. That means it's always there to happen. It's just waiting for you. It's just waiting for an exposure to cause to lead out to any impact. And then again, you find into this scenario there are some significant that can be happening. Now, if you say it's a slightly threat to life, that means an outbreak can happen and then no serious injury, no serious death that can be happening. But if it's a moderate, that means it can happen, and whether it's unforeseeable results can be happening, but it's very unlikely to be to involve a fatality. But if it's a significant, that means the fire can happen, and of course it can lead to injury to either one or more of the people or employee or occupant into that area. But it's very unlikely to involve multiple fatalities. But for the severe, that means that scenario, it can have a multiple fatality. Let's take for example, an oil tanker, just the fire starts in an oil tanker, and there are people around there. It's a very severe consequence into that scenario. So with that, you find you have the number of to-dos or not to do. So you find the situation like you find this kind of statement like it is recommended that you apply this and this, considering implementing this and this, contemplating the option this and this, or addressing the failing this and this. So if you are an assessor and you are producing a report for whether your client or for whether it's a responsible person in that area, then clarity is very essential. It's essential in that report in deciding what to do and not to do. Just be clear of what is supposed to be done and how it's supposed to be done and what is not supposed to be done into that area. Then clarity is very essential. So you find in clarity you have some number of issues probably might require immediate action, then you have to specify this require immediate action, this need an action but within maybe probably 3 months, or maybe probably 6 months, or probably 12 months, or probably in the long run considering implementing this and this. So you have to be clear, you have to make sure whether it's the client or whoever is reading that report understand what is supposed to be done. And there are a number of factors which can affect the risk level. I discussed them, some of them, starting from material selection, the management itself, the reliability of this protection equipment, the awareness of the staff, the availability of these equipment, the design itself, the construction method, the suppression system, the fire resistance, whether it's a door or the walls that you have. So these, all of them, in one point or another, they can influence the risk level to that area. Yep. And you will need to reduce them, whether it's to replace the source of ignition or to eliminate it, whether it's to replace the flame, whether it's a whole trip that has been done into that area, whether it's to separate the fuel and the source of ignition itself. So you have to make sure you reduce those risks. You take whatever precaution to make sure that you reduce them to as low as possible. So remember also to take precautions to avoid any kind of access to premises or to the area that you are working in. Make sure you take precaution to this. Yeah. So as we are going to the, we are almost the end of our session today. So these are some of the responsibility and liability of whether it's the business owner or this is the responsible person into that area. So you have to make sure you reduce the risk of fire, to make sure you keep the people safe. Why? Because it saves their lives, it's a legal duty. But again, it's make a good business sense into your area. But again, you have to make sure while carrying out a fire risk assessment or this assessment, you have to make sure that you use a suitable and a competent person. As we saw, it's a complex operation that you need to analyze a number of things and how they are linking. Then there's a requirement for a competent and experienced person to perform this risk assessment. And after you have the report, you have to make sure that you take whatever appropriate action, whatever was the decision, whatever was the recommendation that were put forward into that assessment to make sure that you reduce that risk to as low as possible. But again, you have to make sure that you maintain the written record, maintain the documentation of that assessment, and again, you review it and update it regularly as required. Just remember that if there is a fire in your area, and again you have not met your legal duties to make sure you keep the people safe or the environment safe, then you have to remember that in that scenario, you could be liable to a number of fines, a number of penalties, and sometimes you can even spend your time in prison. So you have to be careful. You have to really, really be careful when you are doing the assessment, and you have to understand that you need to do assessment. If you have never done it before, then this is your time to do it, to make sure that you assess whatever is required and you protect your people, you protect your business, you protect your environment. This is a little briefing. I hope we had some issues. I know you have a lot that you can say, but at this point, I hope I just try to catch a little bit of each and everything, and we have understand.
Yeah, so Miss Engineer Judith, thank you for the wonderful presentation, and thank you everyone for your time. So we are wrapping up this session. This is coming to an end. It has been a pleasure having you all for this lovely discussion, and I hope it has at least provided you with some extra knowledge in terms of the fire risk assessment, and you can apply it in creating a safe business for your management also. Yeah, again, thank you everyone for your time. We will share the packaging of the presentation